Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is Steve Milloy, who's based over in the States. Steve, it's great to get you on the Godcast. How are you?
Alex, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great, Steve. Now I know you're pretty well known over there in the United States, but for people in the UK who follow the Godcast and listen to my shows and such like, just tell us a bit about your background and what you do, and a little bit about the website that you've set up, Junk Science.
Okay. Well, I am a scientist and statistician by training. I'm also a lawyer. Actually, I'm a securities lawyer as well. Have worked in securities industry. Have done consulting on public health and environmental issues. I started my website, junkscience.com, at the dawn of the internet in 1995. It was probably the first sort of I'm a science critic, meaning that I'm not critical of science, but I'm critical of the bad science that is published. And I've been doing that for let's see, we're working on 30 years now. And I focus on junk science, which is bad science used to push political and financial agendas. I've worked a lot on climate, but I've worked on all sorts of environmental public health issues, diet, um, and I focus mostly on the scientific process, and which I think has really been perverted over the last couple generations. That's kind of an intro to what I do.
Can you remember the first thing that kind of freaked you out a little bit, where you just kind of thought this is not right?
Well, the very first thing, very first environmental project I worked on in 1990 had to do with air pollution. And it was a mixture of, well, it was all about how do you value air quality? And the government of the United States wanted to fine General Motors, our big car company, for air pollution. And the way it was going about that, it was asking people, it would conduct these surveys. How much would you pay to see cleaner air over this mountain range? And people would just, arbitrarily come up with a number. It was just, I'm like, what? And then I just worked on a bunch of other issues. I worked on pesticide issues, toxic waste site issues, air quality issues, water quality, food issues, just everything. And what I found is that there's just an incredible amount of nonsense science that is the basis for government policy. I was actually hired by the government, by the American Department of Energy, because they were being tortured by our Environmental Protection Agency on waste site cleanup, our weapons laboratories and the radiation. So, and since then, I have, I just, I have, I've been fascinated by the lying that goes into much of what passes as science.
You say on your website, I'm just looking at it so I get it right. You're saying that being wrong is not the same as being guilty of junk science. And I said to you before we hit the record button, I'm not here to be particularly controversial, just to get your thoughts. But I wonder how much I'm wrong on, how much I believe to be the truth, but I'm just wrong.
Yeah,
If that makes sense, because there is so much, isn't there? I've just been looking on X before we came on, and for every opinion that says one thing, there is an opinion that says something
yeah.
else. And I'm quite a trusting person. I like to believe when somebody tells me something, that's the truth, but it all gets muddled up, doesn't it? Is that fair?
Yeah, no. Well, and so people really get taken advantage of by scientists because I think there's this fantasy out there that scientists are some higher form of life and don't lie. And in fact, they are just regular people like everybody else, and they have the same foibles as anyone else and tell fibs. So, I mean, there are great scientists, there are bad scientists, there are scientists that know a lot about one area, but you get them in another area, they're just like man on the street. And I just try to sort that out for people. I've been fascinated how governments in particular have weaponized science against people in favor of various political agendas.
Yeah. So would you be happy to be placed in the climate change denier box, Steve? Is that where you would place
Well,
yourself?
I'm not a denier of anything, but that is where, you know, people who want to advance the climate agenda have placed me. So, okay, you want to call me a climate denier, whatever. All that means to me is that you can't really, not you, but I mean, these people who are advancing this idea can't really defend themselves. That's why, the climate hoaxers, as I call them, they will not debate me or people like me because they know that they will lose. I mean, they're counting on being able to con enough people to make their political agenda happen, irrespective of critics.
And what would you say is one of the, can you give a couple of examples of where what you would say would be like gross misrepresentations in science are regarding the environment right now?
Well, I mean, the big issue is climate. I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but we have this notion that emissions are causing climate change, and there's really a lot we can talk about. I mean, perhaps um, one thing we can talk about is is global warming happening, and what is the cause? Well, uh, the first off, there is no average temperature for the Earth. No, I don't even know how you would calculate that. The temperatures are different all over the earth at the same time. The average temperature has no physical meaning. How would we measure these temperatures? In the UK, for example, um, a good percentage of UK temperature stations are not accurate to within two degrees 2 degrees C, and a lot of them are not accurate to within 5 degrees C. Yet we claim to be able to calculate global temperature with a precision of about 1 degree C. It just makes no sense.
Steve, I want to speak for the kind of the regular person in the street. So here's an example for you. Okay, so I have a church. It's a Godcast. People won't be surprised by that. Our boiler packed up in our church, so we had to replace it, and we were very much encouraged to look for a carbon net zero system for our church. And in UK terms, the cost of that was going to be £100,000. To replace it for a like for like traditional boiler, £25,000.
Right.
And we went for that because we haven't got the money to do what they wanted us to do. Would there have been a big difference if we'd invested more money or not?
Well, let me put it to you this way. So the UK is about 2% of global emissions, I believe. It's very small. It's about, I think, on the order of 2%. The UK could go dark today and forever. I mean, no electricity, nothing, just not exist. And the difference in global emissions would be about 2%, which obviously is not going to make any difference. The notion that, the government would force your church to pay 4 times more for a heat pump versus a gas furnace, we call them furnaces in the US, is just absurd. There is no way the emissions related to your church or any building or even your country are going to make a difference in the world. I mean, the whole thing is just foolishness. I mean, it's stealing resources from your church, which you would normally spend on your parish and doing good works and things like that. It's sending it basically to a company for a political agenda. It's crazy.
Do you think there's some sort of kind of spiritual brainwashing going on here? Christians are taught to love the environment. I suppose you're not saying don't love the environment. Just don't believe what you're told. Is that what you're saying?
Well, look, if you want to take care of the environment, okay, which normal everybody does. We all drink the same water and eat the same food. Developed countries have the cleanest environments. You want to see terrible environments, go to poor countries, go to India, go to places in Asia, go to China, go to Indonesia. These are places that have terrible, dirty environments. It's the wealthy countries. It's fossil fuels that have made us wealthy. Fossil fuels are clean. They have made us wealthy. We have the cleanest environments. We have the greatest life expectancy. We're the healthiest nations. I mean, if you're for all these, I mean, fossil fuels have made our world happen. Without fossil fuels, it would be a very dark place. If you value life, before fossil fuels, there were less than a billion people on the planet. Now there are more than 8 billion living longer, healthier, wealthier, freer lives than ever before. The attack on fossil fuels is ridiculous. Saying that it's hurting the environment is ridiculous. There is no science to back that up. Yes, there are environmental problems here and there that, we can fix and improve, but they're going to be fixed and improved by money. And that money comes from the economic development that fossil fuels have provided.
And what's your take on the way we dispose of waste, Steve? Back in the 80s when I was a kid, it all went to landfill. And
Yeah.
now in what you would describe as your backyard, we've got recycling bins for paper, for plastic and general rubbish. What's your take on that? Do you think it?
Well, we used to burn trash in incinerators because that was just the easiest way to do it, even before landfills. But that could be kind of dirty, so we started doing landfills, and then along came recycling. Well, recycling doesn't really make sense for trash. I mean, there's some valuable trash, metals, for example, that can be recycled, maybe glass, but everything else is really just trash. Now, um, landfilling is okay, but it's sort of a pointless use of land. I mean, what we could be doing is going back to incineration, but in modern incinerators, because modern incinerators are clean. The emissions are going to be basically nothing. The carbon dioxide emissions don't matter, but we could be, using trash for energy. And I think that that is the most sensible way to do this versus, for a while in America, and for all I know, the UK too, we were shipping trash to places like Asia and Africa, uh, ostensibly for recycling. But what happened was they just throw it in the ocean or throw it in a river and it goes out in the ocean. If we have plastic trash in the ocean. Worldwide, we need to be burning trash in modern incinerators for energy. That's the best way to handle trash.
Okay. And how does this play into the political system now, Steve, today in the UK and I'm sure in America? All the news is about tariffs that Donald Trump is imposing on other nations.
Right.
How does this play out environmentally, do you think? And how will under his leadership, will things change in America?
Well, so I think these tariffs are really, the point is not to make things cost more. The point is just people think that tariffs are not free trade oriented, but they really are because we just need tariffs to come down all across the world and just allow the free flow of goods. Um, a lot of countries, especially in Europe, have, they've bought into the climate hoax, and they've tried to lower their emissions to make it seem like they're doing something for the climate when they've really just exported their emissions to China and India and Asia. Um, and now in Europe, they want to have carbon border adjustment mechanisms, where just sort of a carbon tax, for trade, and it's protectionist. And I think we need to get rid of all of that. And I think that's where Trump wants to get rid of. And for the United States, whether people realize this or not, or like it or not, uh, you know, we defend a lot of the world. A lot of the technology, all the technology the world uses comes from the United States, and we have fallen for this. The notion that we could just have free trade and let everything be made in China has not worked out for us. Um, a lot of our a lot of vital goods that we need in the United States, we're now dependent on communist China for, and the same in the UK. Okay, we don't make cars in the United States anymore. We get them from China, from Canada, from Mexico. We need to make them here. We need to have those good paying jobs here. In the UK, you guys need to have the high paying industrial jobs. Once again, you should not be importing cars from China. Yeah, China can make cars cheap because they got a billion people in a totalitarian government, including slave labor. Yes, of course, they can make things cheaper, but is that really what you want? We need to come to some sort of happy medium where every country has industries, local industries that have provide good jobs and provide consumers with the products they want. And that's what Trump is trying to do. And we can have global trade, but let's make it fair. I mean, it's a very complex issue. I know I'm giving it short shrift, but I'm trying to do the best I can in 2 minutes.
Is it realistic, Steve? Or is it a pipe dream? I mean, I live in a place called Burnley, which is in the north of England, and we've got incredible industrial heritage here. I've lived and grown up here, and I speak to some of the old people who tell me of a time where there was 150 mill towers across the town, where from the cotton industry or the coal mining industry. And growing up, I was always a bit saddened by the loss of those industries that were the pivotal to the economy of the town and to the north of England, and they've been replaced by call centres and cheap clothing manufacturers and such like. And so part of me yearns for that kind of history to return, but I do wonder, is it just a pipe dream? Is it pie in the sky? Can we actually get back to those times?
Well, I think people need to recall that, the Industrial Revolution made the UK great, right? Great Britain made the UK great, made America great. And we kind of moved on from that. Now information technology is very important. That's all fine. Um, People have this aversion to industry because they think of smokestacks and dirty smokestacks and the pollution that, used to happen. And all that's true. There's no question about that. But it's no longer, you know, 1825 or 1925. It's 2025. And we have modern ways of doing all these things. And, if we didn't have, and we could ship trade around the world as necessary, as Adam Smith suggested. If certain countries are good at producing things, well, that's fine. But we don't live in this world where we everyone gets along, right? There's this big country on the other side of the world with 1.3 or 4 billion people called China, which has its own geopolitical goals, which are not benevolent. And so we have to deal with that as well. But I think that yes, we can bring industry. We have to bring industry back. The UK has to bring industry back. Why was the UK want to be dependent on Europe, much less China? And it's the same in the United States. We need to make basic goods ourselves, and we can trade the other stuff. We can get French wine, which is but we need to make basic vital goods nationally, especially important countries like the UK, like the United States. Okay, the world depends on us for protection and safety, and we cannot be dependent on a geopolitical rival like China.
Are you hopeful for the future? I mean, I've got young adult kids, and lots of kids ask me, "Are we all going to be all right? What's going on in the world?" Do you think this kind of political storm or this period of time where there seems to be a lot of trouble in the world, do you worry about it yourself as a scientist? Do you think that we'll come through that sooner rather than later?
Well, of course, I worry about it, and I think we will. But people, instead of worrying about it, people need to do something about it. And in America, the left has been in America for more than 150 years and working to subvert America. And they've been in the UK for a very long time trying to subvert the UK. Uh, and the left has captured many institutions, schools, the government, a lot of businesses, and people have not realized this. I've been trying to warn people about this for the last 30 years about this, capture by the left, and it's been going on for much longer. So people just have to realize, take a greater interest in what's going on. Um, we need to fix our education system. We have in the United States, we have allowed the left to take over the education system. So they have raised a generation of kids that really don't know anything. Many of our kids can't read, can't do math, especially if you're, from, in like a part of a minority population in a big city. Those kids have been left behind. We can't have that anymore. We need to do a much better job with education. People, we need to keep making our world better every day. People need to get involved. Religion is very important to all this. The left has been trying to get rid of religion. And so, yeah, we can save ourselves. People just have to make an effort, which, people have always had to make an effort to survive. And somehow we've come to the place where we think government is going to protect us. No, government, as Ronald Reagan said, government is the problem.
And I've got some questions I want to ask. And um, as a Christian minister, Steve, like we've talked about at the beginning, scientists have got different opinions, theologians have got difference of opinions, and I'm part of an inclusive church network. I'm probably we may disagree on this, but where would you be in terms of education of our young people around matters of sexuality and gender and things like that? From your position as a scientist, do you think we've uh, the kind of the inclusive and the agenda around trans people, and all this kind of stuff is gone too far? Would you like to see it removed or changed?
Yeah. Well, so, it's a great question. It's a tough question. I don't think government, this stuff should not be in school. So I think this is a family issue. I'm not, you know, I, there's always been a certain, trans part of the population, but it seems like it has become a fad recently. And I don't know that the numbers, it's not 10% of kids that are trans. Um, we should not be letting kids decide whether they go through puberty or not. I think that is morally wrong. Um, Kids should go through puberty as what they are. And when they get to be adults, I guess you can do what you want. But I just think it's wrong. And the notion that this is done without parental consent is just obscene. Until kids are adults, their parents are responsible for them. Their parents get to make the decisions. And there's a lot of once again, there's a lot of bad information out there. It comes from the left. This is not something pushed by the right anywhere. I don't know that it's making anybody's life better. This whole issue of boys playing girls' sports is ridiculous. You may identify yourself as whatever you are, but there are, essentially two types of people. There are men and there are women, and I mean, that's just the scientific reality as much as the left has tried to blur it.
Yeah, I think in many ways I agree with you. I think again, I said at the beginning, it's not about my views, but I think there is something very important to be said about a child just being allowed to go through adolescence and puberty. I'm certainly not the same person I was when I was a 14, 15 rebellious teenager with my ears pierced and
Yeah.
pretending to be Robert Smith from The Cure. It, I think it's important that we do go through those things. But and what about things like COVID, Steve? I'm sure you've got a view on on COVID-19, the coronavirus. I
Yeah.
again coming back to my naivety. I took the jab. I was quite poorly. Um, I'll never take that jab again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, well, I mean, COVID was just a disaster. It was completely mismanaged. In the beginning, the public health establishment denied it. Then all of a sudden, they wanted to mandate vaccines, and they came up with all this non-scientific social distancing stuff. And they called these things vaccines. They weren't really vaccines because they didn't prevent the transmission. They didn't prevent you from getting the disease. I mean, it was just of course, have been railing against the corruption, politicization, incompetence of the public health establishment since I started junkscience.com in 1995. And it wasn't until COVID that people sort of dialed into it and they saw it in action. That was a terrible, terrible episode. We still have not recovered from it. Our economy has not recovered. Our schools have not recovered, and then no one has been held accountable. So in the United States, we now have Robert Kennedy Jr. as our Secretary of Health. And it is my hope that he does a complete sort of autopsy on what happened during COVID, and people are held responsible, and actual lessons can be learned. But that was just a disaster from A to Z. I think the government's response made the epidemic last longer than it needed to be. We're seeing now that the government is really trying to, um, I think, extend the bird flu epidemic around the world. Has still has not learned its lesson. Viruses happen from time to time. Um, they burn themselves out, and we've got to learn to adapt to them while they're burning themselves out and not destroy our society.
So, in your view, Steve, what should we have done? When this virus lands on our doorsteps, should we have just let it pass through naturally? Is that your view, or
Yeah, I think some people could take the vaccine. We could work on vaccines. Of course, when you vaccines work best when the virus has kind of played itself out. To develop a vaccine, as the virus is mutating, is really going to be very difficult to do because then you're going to need booster shots all the time. And we have our vaccine schedule is kind of crazy. Yeah, I think that the virus needed to play itself out. People could take precautions, whatever precautions, made sense. I mean, the problem is a lot of these precautions were just made up, like, the social distancing. Um, the virus was not dangerous to children by and large. It was really for older people. So older people maybe should have been careful. The masks, of course, the masking was ridiculous. Most people were wearing the wrong kind of masks to start with. Um, but debate any of this because, you know, critics, skeptics were shut down, right? I mean, you could not discuss anything that was not allowed by the public health establishment and the government, and that was wrong. I mean, that was worse than the virus.
you said something there that made my ears prick up was that children were the least likely to be affected by the virus, but actually now I wonder if they have become the most affected people by the virus. In our
Yeah.
context, we've got kids who have got, we seem to have lots of issues around mental health in our young people. In our very young children, there were children who were not ready to start school when they should have been. They were behind the curve. Some of them were incontinent. Some of them couldn't learn how to hold a pen or a pencil and write their form a few letters. So, do you agree with that, Steve? Do you think that the children are,
Absolutely.
yeah.
These kids weren't hurt by the virus. They were hurt by the government response to the virus, the insanity, the shutting down of schools, these, halting of social intercourse and discourse. Yeah, I mean, that has hurt. It's still hurting kids today. Kids that were in school couldn't go to school, couldn't develop normally. No one cared about those people, and parents were intimidated by the government, and the government liked it that way.
Do you think can you see any threats like this coming around again soon, or do you think this is kind of a once in a
Well, we,
generation?
we, we've seen it in the United States with bird flu. We recently, I mean, this sounds kind of trivial compared to everything else. Egg prices recently spiked in the United States because last year the Biden administration, their policy on bird flu was just to kill every animal that was infected. And that caused a food shortage and price spikes. I mean, the government still does not know how to respond to these things. And we're going to pay the price as long as, we have this sort of the tyranny of the expert. These people are not experts. They're just power crazy people. Okay. They don't really understand what's going on. They just think, oh, I'm a doctor and I'm in charge of, this government department, so I can do whatever crazy thing I want. That's got to end. Okay. That is not working out for us.
Steve, I've really loved chatting to you. Fascinating conversation. And what about the future then, Steve? Are you optimistic for the States, for America in the next 5 years under Trump's administration? How different do you think America will be in 5 years
Well,
from now?
sometimes I predict the future, but what the world is going to be like in 5 years or 4 years, that's a little too difficult to predict. I'm going to say that I'm optimistic. He is trying to shake things up. He may make some mistakes, but I understand what he's trying to do, and I think we got to do it because we are on a doomsday course as it is. And I think the same is true for the UK. And we need better government, and by that I mean limited government. We need to allow people the freedom to run their lives because they will do the best job.
And do you think it's good that political institutions and establishments get a good shake-up from time to time? In the UK, we are very much seeing the rise. I don't know if you follow British politics, but you're seeing the rise of what would be known as Reform UK, headed up by a friend of Mr. Trump, Nigel Farage. The left are I think are trembling in their boots at the moment, and the Conservatives are kind of just waiting, I think, to see what happens.
Well, so I'm going to make this one observation with the UK because I do follow what's going on there. It seems to me, so you guys are being driven crazy by this net zero agenda. And, the most conservatives in the UK, like newspapers like the Telegraph or the Times, the most they'll allow criticism is, well, maybe we should slow down the net zero drive. Um, you can't actually, and conservatives can't actually debate climate science in the media anyway. And I think that that's a real problem. See, in the United States, we are well on our way to getting rid of the climate hoax. But you can't in the UK because the debate is limited to how fast you're going to get to net zero. You're never going to get to net zero. Nothing is impossible. You are just destroying your country trying to get there. Um, so I see that as a real problem. Um, there's no real debate about that, and that is the fundamental problem. There's appear to be some things that you just can't debate, and I don't understand why.
But do you foresee Nigel Farage potentially being the next Prime Minister of the country?
I mean, yeah, that's a huge lift, right? Because I mean, you've got a lot of the country are hardcore leftists. You've got, much of the country conservative, but think that he's too, might be too radical. I like Nigel Farage. I think he's right. I think he's kind of like Donald Trump. He wants to shake things up. And so the course we're on now, in America, we call it the uniparty, where Republicans, a lot of Republicans and Democrats just kind of like this um, slow walk into communism. Um, and I think the same thing has happened in the UK with Labour and the Tory party. And so Farage is trying to shake that. He wants to stop that. And I think he's right.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming on. Have you been to the UK, Steve? Is it a place you've
I have
visited?
been to the UK. I love the UK.
Have you been? Have you been?
My favorite place is Westminster Abbey. I just that's just that's the most wonderful place to be.
It is a beautiful place. Yeah, yeah. As I sit on the General Synod for the Church of England, so I've been had the privilege of being at some beautiful services there. Have you been
Yeah.
to the north? Have you been as far as Manchester?
I have not been that far north.
Well, next time maybe get your brew, show you
Yeah,
the delights of
yeah.
the north.
Would love to go to Scotland too, and
Mm, beautiful.
see.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on. I hope people have enjoyed this chat with Steve, and I know that some of the conversation will have been controversial. I do try and get the balance in all my podcasts, but check this out. Check out the Godcast. There is something there for everybody. But for now, Steve, thanks for coming on the Godcast.
All right, Alex. Thank you.